Hera, Aphrodite, Athena, Artemis, Cassandra, Helena. Greek mythology is full of women. Some women that we admire and some women that we fear. This is Ruby and Rose, and today I'm going to talk about one of the most fascinating women in Greek mythology that we both fear and admired. This is the story of Medea. So when you think about Medea, there's most likely to be one source that you're familiar with, one source that you know her from, which is, of course, the tragedy by Euripedes, right? And this is the one that is considered to be the defining one, the de facto version of this tale. But as we know with Greek mythology and with things that are this old and things that originate in folklore and religion, there is more than one version of it. Where I want to get with this, there have been many tales over the years that have been reinterpreted according to the values of the time which is interpreting them, right? A very famous example of this is Cervantes, right? Don Quixote, which, depending on the time frame, is viewed as either a comedy or a tragedy. Oh, look at him, he's so funny, he's fighting monsters that don't exist, he's charging his lance at windmills. And oh, what tragic, he's fighting some monsters that don't exist. He's charging with his lance towards windmills, you know? In Greek mythology, one very famous such case is that of Persephone, right? Because the tale of Persephone really originates in a very tale that you tell children when they won't stop asking questions. Oh, why do we have seasons? Because this is the story. She goes to the underworld. She's married to Hades. She comes back every now and then. From that, it evolved, of course, into the religious and mythological belief of the ancient Greeks, which explained the season cycle to them. And from that, it kept evolving until nowadays it's viewed as a kind of a weirdo story, kind of a creepy stalker story, right? Hades was kind of a weird guy for keeping Persephone, who initially didn't really want to have anything to do with him, against the wishes of her very powerful mother, who is one of the most important goddesses in the Olympus, for being, the goddess of agriculture, the thing that keeps humans alive, So this is one of the cases of stories that have been reinterpreted through times. Medea is no different from this. So, before we can talk about Medea herself, let me talk to you a little bit about how I discovered the Greek tragedy. So back in high school, I had a theater teacher who introduced us to the idea of the Greek tragedy. And the idea of the Greek tragedy is that it operates in a different sort of mechanic than the hero's journey that we know today, right? So the one that he introduced us with was Antigone. And I was fascinated, I was hooked by this story because Antigone focuses on a conflict that can't really be solved by any reasonable means, and this is why it's a tragedy. We grew used to the hero's journey, the Western hero's journey, the Lord of the Rings thing. The hero lives a life that they are very used to and they're comfortable with. Something happens that throws them into a quest and they must go out and adventure and solve mysteries and face challenges and learn something and solve the problem, and by the end they go back to their regular life, but something has changed about them. And this is the story that we've grown used to, right? To us, a hero's journey is this. The Greek tragic hero doesn't quite work like that. And much of Greek tragedy focuses on the idea of dilemmas, right? Of questions that can't really be answered, things that don't really have a solution. For example, Antigone. Antigone's brother was disgraced by the king who usurped the throne from him, and now his dead body lay waste on the outskirts of the town. Now, does Antigone follow the laws of man put in place by her uncle, the king, and not give her brother a burial, or does she follow the laws of the gods, which say that her brother must be buried properly, otherwise his soul will be doomed to roam the Styx riverbanks for eternity and never find the afterlife? There really isn't an answer to that. And this is what makes it a tragedy. And it really unsettles us, right? Because we have grown to want, to crave that resolution. And even when that resolution doesn't happen the way we want, it does happen in the hero's journey that we know. And that's significant to us. But to the Greeks, since the tragedy, as opposed to the comedy, which was more of a party thing, the tragedy was a morality event, right? It was a religious event. It was the Gil Vicente of their times. It was the Charles Dickens of their times, really. When you watch a Greek tragedy, you're supposed to learn something about morality. You're supposed to learn something about what is right and what is wrong. I find it very interesting that one such dilemma has risen from another story from Greek mythology in recent days, and that is of another woman with a very similar name that you may think about, which is Medusa, right? I was very happy when I watched the Percy Jackson series on Disney Plus, because they expanded on Medusa's story. The way they dealt with it was fantastic compared to the books, which do hint at that but never fully realize it. You know, on the series they really focus on the dilemma that Medusa has evolved into. So in the early versions of the legend, Medusa was just big scary monster, right? She was a woman with snakes for hair, who, if you look at her, you become stone, and Perseus kills her, happy ending, right? Priestesses would use her mask in rituals to avoid unwanted men from walking in uninvited, and so on. But Medusa's story has evolved beyond that onto the one that we know today. Medusa is one of 3 Gorgons, while her sisters are big monster things that are very strong and immortal. Medusa is mortal. She does have wings in some versions of the story, but she is the only one of them that can die and that ages. And so one day Medusa is raped by the god of sea, Poseidon, in Athena's temple. Athena, understandably, is very angry at this and decides to punish Medusa for this. One of many such cases of the goddess of wisdom not being so wise herself. And so the punishment that she inflicts is that Medusa's hair turns to snakes and everything that lives, that looks into her eyes, dies. And the Percy Jackson series really put into perspective whether that's a curse or a blessing, right? Because Medusa herself in the series insists that it's a blessing, because she was bullied once, she was attacked once, and now she can never be attacked again. And of course, Annabeth, Athena's kid, says no, it's a curse. And this book by Natalie Haynes really homes in on that. You know, for Medusa, this works like a curse. You know, she can never look at birds again. She can never look at sheep again. She can never even look at her sisters again, at the people she loves again, which forces her into a life of loneliness until she's killed in her sleep by Perseus, who is, with the help of not 1 but 4 gods, including Athena herself. Which means Athena wasn't very happy with just cursing the kid. The kid would die eventually. She was the only mortal Gorgon. She was the only one of them that would eventually age and die, but Athena wasn't happy with that. She needed her killed, you know. So it's crazy to see how Medusa went from a big scary monster into what today we understand as a victim, right? She was a victim in our modern standards. So this is what I mean when I say that stories get reinterpreted over time. Medusa went from this Medusa, the big scary monster, to this Medusa that we understand today, right? The victim. Medea, on the other hand, seems to have done much of the opposite way around. This book here is called Medeia, The Right to Ire and Jealousy. It was written by Olga Rinne, German author, in the 80s. And it proposes the very interesting idea that Medea may have evolved from the matriarchal societies pre-Greece, right? So these societies were matriarchal societies, and they had a matriarchal religion, right? Connected to the phases of the moon, connected to a cycle of destruction and life. The first depictions that we see of Medea are of her with the famous cauldron, where new life is emerging from this cauldron. The original, if we can call her that, the original Medea was part of a trinity of goddesses that are one goddess that represent the cycles of death and birth. So Medea was a healer, Medea was a symbol of life and fertility, at the same time that she was on the end of a spectrum that also included death, that also included sacrifice, that also included winter. So it was not just roses and happiness and sprouting new life. No, there was an aspect of death. But these matriarchal religions, they did have that that sort of view of the world, right? In order for life to exist, there must be death. And Medea represented a part of that cycle. So how do we get from Medea, the healer, Medea, the symbol of the eternal cycle of life and death, how do we get from that Medea to child killer Medea? Well, Olga in this book suggests that it was the shift between these matriarchal pre-Greek societies into the patriarchal Greek society. So when the Greeks took over the land, they adapted these legends and these gods and goddesses into their own folklore, into their own religion. This is where it happened. This is where the same traits of life and death that made Medea a goddess made her into a witch. So in order to fully understand this transformation, we have to resort to, of course, our friend Euripedes. Are there other versions of Medea in Greece? Yes, there are. In Corinth, there used to be a version where Medea was the queen of the city, and it's not her killing the kids, it's actually the people of the city which are upset with her for stuff that she's done. But this is not the version that won, right? Even though this is a very interesting version where which also ties in with Achilles' story, and by the end Medea marries Achilles in the afterlife. It's crazy. Maybe I'll talk about this eventually, but let's recap the original Medea for you, the one that you know. Before we talk about the tragedy itself, we must talk about the backstory, about the Odyssey. So basically, when Medea comes into the Odyssey, it's when Jason arrives in Colchis, which is modern-day Georgia. Georgia the country, not Georgia the state. There, she is the daughter of the king, which guards the golden fleece, which of course is the reason why Jason is there. Jason is there to retrieve the fleece so he can give it to his uncle who usurped the throne from him. Now, to retrieve the fleece, Jason must of course do a bunch of tasks, and Medea falls head over heels for him. Medea is absolutely in love with this guy, and she decides to help him in his quest. The thing is, Medea is a very, very, very intelligent woman. If there is one thing that is consistent across all of the tellings of Medea, is that she is super intelligent and she is super versed in the world of healing and in the world of magic, right? These things were very connected. So basically the entire reason why Jason succeeds in his quest is because Medea helps him. She is the one who gives him a potion that makes him resistant to the fire of the bronze bowls that her father has Jason defeat. She is the one who puts the dragon that guards the fleece to sleep with her magic so that Jason can go and get the thing. So of course Jason begs her to marry him, right? Because he is eternally grateful to her and he will never do her wrong in his entire life. Well, when they escape with the fleece and the angry king is on their path, Medea kidnaps her brother and chops him up into little pieces, chucking each bit in a different place, so the king would be forced to stop and pick up the pieces to give them a proper burial, which slows him down and allows them to flee. And on the way back, Medea keeps helping on Jason. When they arrive back at Jason's place, his uncle does not yield to the throne. So Medea talks to his daughters and shows that she can actually give their dad a new life. The way she does that is she picks up a lamb, chops him up into pieces, throws him in a big cauldron, boils him, and he comes back to life, younger and stronger than ever. Now this looks very familiar to the image of Medea that we have seen, the prototypical image from the matriarchal societies, and that is no coincidence. Of course, the daughters of the king are super excited about this. Their dad is already old, so they want to see him back to his full youth, so they chop him up into pieces and chuck them into the cauldron, and Medea does nothing. She leaves the king there to die. So what we have learned about Medea at this point is she is super intelligent, she can do magic, she can do healing, and she is not afraid to kill. She's just a little unhinged, isn't she? Well, this kicks us into the tragedy itself. By the time the tragedy rolls around, Medea has 2 children with Jason, and they have moved into Corinth, right? Because Jason left his brother in charge and moved elsewhere. However, the king of Corinth, Creon, offers his daughter for Jason to marry, and Jason says yes. Now, wasn't that the Jason that promised Medea eternal fidelity? Isn't that the Jason that promised Medea full gratitude for what she did for him? For she basically made him who he is now. Isn't that eternally grateful Jason? Doesn't he owe her anything? So by the start of the tragedy, Medea is just reeling. Medea is crying. She's a mess. The choir, remember, Greek tragedies had a choir which was supposed to symbolize the people of the city, in this case specifically the women of the city. Is all pity on Medea. Poor her, she was betrayed by her husband, but well, what can we do? Men are men, right? If he chooses to marry another one, he can do that. Such a shame that she's so emotional about it. And Medea is just reeling in sadness until she gets the news that King Creon has banished her and her children from Corinth, and they must leave immediately. Now, why does Creon do this? Well, he himself says that he's afraid of her, right? If there's one thing that King Creon isn't, is a fool. He knows Medea is a dangerous woman. He knows she's vengeful. He knows she's not afraid to kill. And he knows that being the father of the woman whom Jason is going to marry now, he is first on that target list. So he doesn't want anything to happen to him, to his daughter, or to Jason. So he banishes Medea and the kids. Medea begs him to stay. He doesn't yield. Medea begs him for one more day. And he's like, fine, you may have one more day to plan where you want to go. And he leaves. And Medea, of course, is distraught by this because she has one more day to find out what she's gonna do, and she doesn't have anyone. Remember, Medea is all the way from Georgia. They are in Greece. She betrayed her family in Georgia, right, in Caucasus. So she may never go back there because she's not wanted there anymore. She betrayed her father. She betrayed her brother. She killed her brother. And she can't stay in Greece. She can't move anywhere in Greece because the Greeks know that she's a sorceress. She's old and she's a barbarian. She comes from a weird country far away. Nobody knows what it's like there. You know, they're afraid of her. So she doesn't really have anywhere to go or anyone to trust. And so Jason shows up to her house. And this is where Medea has some hope, because she knows that Jason may talk to the king and make the things easier for her, right? But does Jason do that? In university, I was introduced to Gota d'Água, which is a play by the great Brazilian composer Chico Buarque. This play is basically a Brazilian adaptation of Medea, and the name Gota d'Água translates literally to drop of water, which is an expression in Portuguese that is equivalent to the English the last straw. Let me demonstrate. Now, I am sure we can all agree that spilling this glass of water on this table would be quite a disaster. And the glass of water cannot reach the top, otherwise it will spill over. But even though it looks full, it's certainly more full than any glass of water that you would normally serve anyone. There's still a little bit of space, so what harm can it be to add just a little more water? I mean, you can take it, right? And we can just keep on adding to it. And now it's up to the top. There's no space left, but I'm pretty sure we can add just a little more. Would you add more? I mean, it's over the top, but it can still hold, right? Until we reach the point that just a little drop of water makes the whole thing spill over. And that, my friends, is where the expression comes from. Oh, no, this isn't water. So what was the last straw for Medeia? What was the last drop of water that made her glass overflow? Because with being banished from the city, her glass was pretty full already. What made her overflow? What made her break? Well, when Jason goes back to her house, she begs him to ask the king to let them stay. And he says he won't. And she says, aren't you grateful for me, for what I did for you, for all the help that I gave you, for your success in the quest, which was all down to what I did for you? Aren't you grateful? Aren't you gonna recognize me for that? And he says, you should be grateful to me, because I took you away from that barbaric country where you live. Now at least you're living with real people who know real laws and talk real language, and you can be somebody. Back there with the bunch of barbarians you called your family, you were nobody. You should be thankful to me. And this is where Jason seals his destiny and the destiny of the people around him. Now Medeia completely breaks, right? Before she interacts with the choir, and she talks about how awful men are, and how awful it is to be a woman in ancient Greece, because it's true. If a man wanted to divorce a woman back then, all he had to say was, I reject you, in public, and they would be done. If a woman wanted to divorce a man, she had to go to court, she had to give reasons, and it was considered a disgrace. So she talks a lot about how unfair it is, and famously says that she would rather go to war 3 times than give birth once, right? And the choir is like, yeah, we understand that, we're women too, we know this pain, right? You go get that. And she says, I'm gonna make Jason pay for it. And the choir's like, yeah, you go make Jason pay for it. And then Medea explains her plan to the choir, and the choir's like, wait, stop. No, that is too much. Please don't do that. But Medea's like, I'm gonna do that anyway. In the meantime, she is visited by Aegeus, which is the king of Athens. And Aegeus offers her refuge in Athens through a bunch of rigmarole that we'll skip later. And now Medea has nothing to hold her back anymore, because she knows that at least somewhere she will be safe. So she puts her plan into motion. She calls the kids back and calls Jason back. She says, Jason, come back here. I have a proposal for you. I'm sorry that I've wronged you. I should have been more grateful to you. You really are right. I owe a lot to you. Would you please ask your wife to ask your father for both of our kids to stay here? Because I know you're thinking of the kids. I know you love them. And I don't want them to be subjected to the dangers of exile like I will be. And Jason's like, I don't think he will be convinced. Then Medea is like, well, I'll send your wife some gifts. Here's a gold diadem and a veil, right? I'm sure she will love those. And Jason at first doesn't want to do it, but then he's convinced, and he brings the kids back to the palace with the diadem and with the veil. Of course, at first his wife doesn't want to do that because she wants nothing to do with Medea's kids, because she wants nothing to do with Medea herself, right? She wants to have her own kids with Jason. That's what she wants to do, right? So they can be the kings of Corinth in the future. However, when the kids show her the veil and the diadem, she falls in love and she's super grateful for the gifts. And she says, of course, people can stay. And she picks up the veil and she picks up the diadem and can't wait to put them on. And so she puts them on. May I remind you that Medea is a witch, right? That diadem was super cursed. That veil was super cursed. When Cruza puts on the diadem and the veil, she's poisoned immediately. She starts foaming through the mouth, and then she falls to the ground and starts like convulsing and stuff, and then she catches on fire. The book, the play actually, has such a wonderful gory description of how this happens. It's really quite brutal. She's falling to the ground, burning up so quickly and so fast that when people get to her, only her father, the king, is able to recognize her. Struck by grief, he holds her in his arms and says, "May death take me with you." And so he burns up together with her. And now what? The kids go back to Medea's place, and she murders them. She kills both of her kids. The kids that she had with Jason, the kids that were, her happiness in life, that were her legacy in life. She kills them. When Jason gets to her, she's already killed the kids, and he curses her to no end. And Medea just gets her kids' bodies, jumps into the carriage of the god of sun Helios, which is her grandfather, and rides off into the sunset, into Athens, where she goes on to marry Aegeus. And this is how the play ends. Jason on his knees, destroyed, lost his wife, lost his kids. He is done. Now, one question that really sticks is, why did Medea kill the kids and not Jason? I mean, the thing to do, right? The country girl thing to do would be to kill the cheating husband, right? Well, you got to remember this is ancient Greece, right? And you got to remember that Jason was immortal, right? And he knows he's gonna die someday. And so a way to keep himself alive, a way to keep a legacy in this earth, is to leave behind children, right? To keep his bloodline alive on the earth. So Jason, is it your blood on the earth that you want? Then blood on the earth you will have. Now, the crime of infanticide has long been seen as the most horrific crime a woman could ever commit. And when I was researching for this video, I talked to a friend, and she told me about a Tunisian folk legend of a woman that is super protective of her son, and one day he takes too long to come back after dark, and when he comes back, she's so taken by madness and anger that she kills her son. And so the gods curse her, turn her into an owl, and she goes out at night hunting for little boys who don't come back home after the sun sets. Of course, this is a boogeyman, but is it a boogeyman? It's not really a boogeyman because, well, first, it's a woman, and she's doing this because she was overprotective of her son, and she killed her son in the anger of being worried about him. And so she hunts for other women's sons to keep them from being awake and away at night, to keep them from danger, to keep their mothers from being as worried about them as she was worried about her son, which is a very, very interesting idea. It is very interesting to see how the tragedy deals with women and with jealousy and with what is seen as good for them and what is seen as good by them, right? It is the first tragedy to discuss the point of view of women in the world that they lived back then. Of course, Aeschylus also has something about the women taking charge too, a play, but it's a comedy, so it's not really meant to be taken seriously. So this discussion was one of the pivotal moments, right, in literature, because it starts dealing with the role of women and the place of women in literature and in art, right? Later adaptations of Medea all follow what Euripedes wrote. Even Ovid from Rome, which I was surprised to find that Ovid, who is known for being a poet, was also responsible for one tragedy in his life, which was his adaptation of Medea. Unfortunately, that has been lost to time, which kind of sucks, you know. We will never know what that looked like because it's gone. But what did survive was a letter that he wrote as Medea to Jason, and in that letter she is regretful. She is lamenting the moment where she betrayed her family to run off with Jason, who mistreated her. Going back to this book, the author puts forward that it's very easy for men in a patriarchal society to put emotion second and work first, right? It's first about the career. It's first about Jason's quest. He needs that to be completed. After that, he thinks of marriage, right? He marries Medea and then reconsiders and marries the daughter of the king because that will be more advantageous to him. For women, marriage comes first in a patriarchal society. And this is why Medea submits herself to Jason, right? Because she did what was expected of her, and her payback was completely dependent on Jason, right? If Jason had decided to be loyal to her for the entire rest of his life, she would have been happy. But he didn't decide for that because it wasn't advantageous to that. It depended on him ultimately. And so this is why she took revenge. And this is why we as an audience are led to sympathize with the child killer, you know. When I was reading this the first time, when Medea killed her children, I was like, go for it, you know. That man treated you super bad. That man, wait, she killed both of the children who had nothing to do with the story. Huh. She took the bodies so she could bury them, and Jason couldn't. Jason didn't have access to that. She destroyed his entire life, but he destroyed her entire life as well. So this is the dilemma, right? Was Medea right in doing what she did? Yes, she was. Jason mistreated her. Jason destroyed her entire life, so she destroyed his entire life. But no, she wasn't. She killed two innocent children that had nothing to do with the story. She killed a woman that didn't have anything to do with the story as well. She killed the king, who all he wanted was to marry his daughter off to someone interesting, right? So this is the dilemma that circles Medea, and this is what makes her character so absurdly fascinating. So, with nothing else left to say from me, though I would love to hear from you in the comments, this is a track called Medeia from my album Ruby and Rose. Now you might be asking yourself, how does the song that I wrote connect to this whole story that we went through? Well, it really only tangentially touches on it, because the song itself is about loving someone who is just a little insane. I hope that you enjoy. Have a great one. Love yourself. Take care. Is it blood on the earth you want? Then blood on the earth you have for your never completion. I said you could bring down a hero, honey, that teaches magic between your witchcraft and your lifestyle. Fire comes straight from the garden. Fire will sanctify you, my lady. Your crazy, burn me to the ground. how much it feels I want, or do I wanna reveal you? Always chasing you ever. She said, I will curse your existence. Nothing good comes from this love. Wanna join me? You will join me there. Fire comes straight from the garden. Fire will sanctify you. Hallelujah. You're crazy. Burn me, burn me, burn me to the ground. Is it blood on the earth you want? Then blood on the earth you have for your never completion. Yeah, I will curse your existence. Nothing good comes from this love. Wanna join me? You will join me, babe. Fire comes straight from the garden, because fire will sanctify you, my lady. You're crazy. Burn me, burn me, burn me to the ground. You, my lady. You're crazy. Burn me, burn me, burn me, burn me to the ground. Taste the sun, the moon, of the stars, and you.